Morning Year 11. Today we're going to continue working on question 3A. That's the usefulness question. You'll need to get out your information sheet from last lesson and the sources document sheet. They match the documents you can see on screen. Okay, so we're faced with the question, how useful are sources B and C for an inquiry into the consequences of the Munich Putsch of 1923? And this time we're looking at source C, which is obviously a painting of the Munich Putsch of 1923. We need to look at this and find out or infer useful information we can find about the consequences of the putsch. Now, first of all, there's an obvious consequence to see, and that's that the putsch ends in failure, with Hitler and the Nazis being fired upon by police and armed forces in Munich. So that's an obvious consequence, the consequence of failure. A second consequence we can pick up on is the fact that Hitler's pictured in the centre as a heroic figure. So again, that reminds us of a positive consequence of the putsch for the Nazis, that Hitler's able to use it for propaganda and to promote himself. So now we can transfer this information onto our worksheet, and you can see an example here on screen. So you need to do that now. So the next stage, now we've found some useful information in the source about the consequences of the putsch, is to apply some of our own historical knowledge to test how accurate those findings are or how legitimate making those statements might be. And this is a process that requires us to use our own knowledge. So on the next slide, I'll show you how that's done with your worksheet. So on your information sheet, you've got a lot of boxes, and each of these boxes reveals consequences of the Munich Putsch. Now you should be able to read through these boxes and find information that would support the notion that the putsch ended in failure and ended in violence on the streets of Munich, and you can prove that that's valid information from the source. Equally, you should also be able to find information relating to how Hitler was able to use the putsch for his propaganda purposes, and again you should be able to match that to the second point we've found. So this task involves you reading that information and just putting your matching knowledge into this second box on your worksheet. Okay, the third stage is perhaps the most complex stage, and that's where you've got to make some legitimate comments about the nature of the source and its purpose that might affect its usefulness. And you're given clues for this here in the form of the attribution, which we're just highlighting in yellow at the top. So again, on the next slide, I'll talk you through some ideas about what you can pick up from the attribution. So again, in considering the nature, origin and purpose, we've got to think about what the source is, when it was produced, why it was produced, the purpose of it, and how that might affect the usefulness of the source. And there's no right or wrong answer here. You just have to think of some legitimate points to make. And again, on the next slide, I'll show you some ideas that you could perhaps put into the box. So from reading the attribution, we can make some legitimate points. We can tell the examiner that the author of the painting was an eyewitness and a participant in the putsch, and those are perhaps positives for the source, but we're going to lean towards the negatives more. It's obviously propaganda celebrating Hitler's role in the putsch. It's therefore clearly one-sided and very subjective. So the artist is probably exaggerating details to make Hitler look more favourable. So this limits its usefulness as a source. It's too narrow and it's too one-sided. So now we've done all our research, we've covered stage 1, stage 2 and the final stage about nature, origin and purpose. We can now apply our understanding through a writing frame that's designed to get us to the maximum marks. So you must begin. The content of source C is useful for inquiring into the consequences of the Munich Putsch. This is because the source reminds us, and then you can develop the things you found in stage 1, and you can support them with your own knowledge, and you can repeat to cover both things. And then obviously finally you end with a discussion of the nature, origin and purpose. So you now need to write up your findings and produce a really powerful answer to the question. The final task is straightforward but really important. I now need you to write your own list of instructions for how to approach question 3A, so you understand there's a sequence that you have to follow to get maximum marks. And you might want to start with the 2 points I put on screen. So always start the question with the sentence, source B is useful for inquiry into, and then the inquiry focus. The second thing you have to do is identify 2 or 3 quotes or details from the source that link to the inquiry focus. And now obviously you can continue that list with your own instructions of how you proceed with question 3.